Welcome to episode 24 of 22 Man Game with Jared and Dame. I'm Jared. That's Damon. It is, as you probably didn't guess, because why would you be guessing when we're recording? 4:28 p.m. Friday, January 23rd, 2026, on the eve of what is said to be some pretty inclement weather in our neck of the woods. Damon, how have you been this last week?
Been good this last week. Been nice and consistent. All things around pursuing some passions of mine. I texted you that I applied to perhaps do some further higher education stuff as well. Just trying to go somewhere. I feel like for a little bit I was kind of just you know doing nothing, like not doing nothing, but I wasn't advancing. I wasn't pushing myself. So now I want to get back into that mindset in many aspects of my life. But yeah, I am good. Episode 24 shout out. I think he's not a bad person, hopefully. Retired Broncos defensive back Champ Bailey. I remember him when I was a kid. He was a dominant force, number 24.
That's a good pull.
How about you, Jared? How are you?
Uh, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Sounds like you've had an enriching week. Um, I have had an okay week myself. Work responsibilities ramping up a little bit. Um, been binging some television that I've really enjoyed, so that's great. Uh, I know you want to keep pushing and challenging yourself, but if you consider that this podcast is the pinnacle of all human achievement.
That, yeah, I haven't really considered that, but I haven't been doing shorts and social media and stuff like I was there every day for a while, so perhaps that's something that can come around the corner too eventually.
Yeah, I think especially, in the off season, a lot of the time we dedicate to watching games can maybe, we can shift that around and do some more peripheral stuff with the pod, but the season is far from over. It is about to reach its climax. In fact, as we roll into the championship week, a lot of teams filling their coaching vacancies, setting up for two really exciting matchups this weekend as well.
Yeah.
So, really excited to dive into it. If you are somewhere that might be affected by this winter storm, stay safe. Have access to alternative sources of power if you can, and heat. Some places are apparently set to get it pretty rough. So,
Get
if you
water.
happen to, if you're using your limited power to listen to us, thank you. We appreciate it.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I think we should just start by diving into the coaching and front office news that doesn't pertain to the divisional round games. This week here, Damon, do you want to start us off with our first little bit of news?
Um, you want to go straight to the front office stuff? That's what you said?
I sure don't, because while the NFL season is finished,
Okay.
I would be remiss. In fact, we would all two of us would be remiss if we didn't first cover a little bit about both the college football playoff and then some player kind of transaction news and MVP news. So, did you get a chance to watch the college football championship, Damon?
I sure did not, because I am not interested in college football really at all. But I am happy for the story of Indiana and their season, completing their undefeated season by emerging victorious over Miami in the national championship game. As a person that doesn't know a ton about college football, I was, of course, rooting for Indiana, as I'm sure a lot of people were. A team that has never won before, a team that kind of came out of nowhere. They've been really, really good in the last few years under Coach Kurt Signetti, something like that. Um, and I love a good underdog program, underdog story. And though they're undefeated this season, this is not one of those typical college football powerhouses, which is like a big part of why I don't like college football because it is often the same teams and kind of the same conference that emerge victorious. So I was happy to see that Indiana had won the game here.
Yeah, I wasn't super plugged in on their origin and I was a little salty when Mendoza beat Diego Pavia for the Heisman. Obviously, though, then Diego decided to look like a tool. So that's on him. No, I think so the little bit I've seen of Mendoza, he seems like a very humble person leading Indiana. And yeah, if your team's never won it before, I'm gonna root for you to do that. Miami has a storied history in the college football playoff. I was kind of tracking the score as it was going along, and it seemed like it was a really close finish, with Miami having a chance to storm back in this game and win at the very end. But certainly always going to celebrate new teams getting a moment in the sun. I'm not crazy for. I know some people really love the idea of dynasties. I personally don't find dynasties to be the most entertaining part of sports. I think it's when new faces, new groups of people are able to find and sustain success. So we'll be curious to see if Indiana can keep their momentum with Mendoza expected to be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, they also blocked a punt pretty late in this game and got a touchdown off of it. So that was a huge play. Also, this is with basically no knowledge. I get weird vibes from Carson Beck. That's another reason that I was okay with Miami not winning. He's like 23 years old. I hate when quarterbacks are, in the college for like that's way too long. I know COVID impacted that and redshirting injuries, blah blah blah.
How do you feel about Tyler Shuck then? You must hate that guy.
Well, he, well, yeah. I don't. I. It's a college which is full of 18 to 20 year olds. So when you're 25, it's a little weird. Um,
Hmm.
but I understand that for players like that, and Tyler Shuck did really well the second half of the NFL season when he got the start. But for players like Carson Beck, like Will Howard at Ohio State last year, Quinn Ewers at UT, I understand that that is probably the pinnacle of their playing career. Like they're not expected to be, superb NFL superstars. So they want to play as long as they can. They want to get NIL money. That's a new part of it now, right?
Hmm.
So like I get it. I get why they're doing it. It's just weird to see like, oh yeah, like that team, is full of like freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and this team is led by like an old man. It's a little
Yeah.
strange.
I looked up Carson Beck to see if there was something particularly evil about his face. I can't necessarily make a comment one way or the other, but I
Oh,
do
you
think
know
that
what? I remember there was a social media thing. Hold on, let me talk, talk, talk,
I
talk.
will talk. I think something that strikes me as a little bit uncomfortable about all of this is whenever you have adults in an unclear role on a college campus, right? Because Carson Beck, through some argument, is a college student, but he's sharing that campus with 17, 18, 19-year olds. And I just feel like the older you get, the more responsibility I would feel you'd have as a college player to separate yourself from that culture. But at that point, why aren't you just going pro or moving on to the next phase of your life? It just seems a little strange. And yeah, to your point, how well can you relate to actually, as a 25-year-old educator, right? I already know that I'm losing students, right? When I make references. So how does this 25-year-old football player, 23-year-old football player really land a message with the 18-year-old kid who's, just learning to play receiver in their system or something like that? Definitely seems like a mismatch.
Yeah. I I couldn't find what I was thinking of. There was a thing when he was back at Georgia where he posted something very strange on or something, you know what I think it was? I can't find it now because now it's just all I'm finding is news about the social, the loss that just happened, but it was something like him basically alluding, do you want a nude photo of me? And I guess somebody like had screenshotted it on Snapchat and posted it on social media. And he got flamed for that. So I think that's
Yeah,
what it
I,
was.
I couldn't find it either just by looking up, social media controversy. Yeah, I mean that's not really something in his control if someone's,
Yeah, yeah,
posting that
yeah.
about him. But either way, he'll be coming into the NFL this year, so I guess we'll see whether Carson Beck is able to continue his successful football career in the league. And perhaps someday he'll achieve the success of the five MVP finalists that have been announced in preparation for the NFL honors coming up in the week prior to the Super Bowl, or yeah, sometime in the week prior to the Super Bowl. Who's our list, Damon? Who are our potential MVPs?
This is the order they were posting in, which I don't really know what that means, but they were Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, Christian McCaffrey, and Matthew Stafford are the five finalists.
Where does I've seen this before. Where does the Drake
I
May fit?
have no idea. I just know it's a thing.
Um, you also said I have no idea what this order might mean. It is alphabetical by last name,
That
so
makes sense.
that's the governing.
Because I know like I just Dom and I potted yesterday and the All-Star starters were announced and I think it was by like most fan votes received is the order that it was
Gotcha.
like announced in. So I didn't, I know that doesn't really play a part into this, but I didn't know if there was a
Does that
certain way
mean
they did
Cade
it.
Cunningham was first?
He was not first, but he was an All-Star starter, so congratulations.
Thank you.
You'll
Yeah,
have to
I
go
think
listen to our championship pie and see where we had the Pistons on our pie if they
yeah.
appear.
Well, if they don't appear, I'll be disappointed. I feel like being the one seed
Fair,
over 40 games is
fair,
enough
fair,
to get
fair.
a sliver. Um,
Any of
either
these names
way,
shocking to you, or do you have any? Did you have any, gut check reactions to this list?
no, I saw Trevor Lawrence had gotten on the other day, and I thought to myself, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. CMC, like I suppose his team made the play. Like I get it, I do. Um, Christian McCaffrey's one of those guys where he's always really good. And don't get me wrong, he probably has a Hall of Fame case when it's all said and done. But I feel like he wasn't the running back we were talking about all season, so maybe a little bit of an interesting
That
pick.
that would have been Jonathan Taylor, but then the Colts fell off a cliff.
Yeah, I think if the Colts had even made it as a wild card, I wonder if that's Jonathan Taylor. But um, everyone's been saying it's a two-way race between Stafford and May.
Yeah,
I would
that's
love
the two I always see in the broadcast. They're like that's they talk about him as MVP finalists. So
I personally think if anyone should get it here on this list at this point, it should probably be Stafford. I think he's done more for the Rant. Like they actually had a side by side of like Stafford versus May, and they had like the same number of picks. But Stafford had like 8 to 10 more touchdowns, and the Patriots yes have a better record, but I just think Stafford to me feels more like a player that I go, oh, value added for sure.
it's weird because I agree with you. I think they're the two clear finalists in terms of team success and how important they were to their teams. But I think the teams around them are good and better than like Josh Allen's team. Like I don't think Josh Allen should win MVP. I don't think he necessarily had an MVP caliber, but I feel like, you take if you put let's say standard backup quarterback on all three of these teams, I think the Bills become worse by the most. You know what I mean? Like I feel like the other teams around Drake May and Matthew Stafford are good enough that they can maybe sustain some amount of success. Obviously, they won't be as good. I'm not saying they'll still be, playoff contenders in championship games, but Josh Allen just feels like he is the Bills.
For sure. Especially now, but we'll get to that when we talk about their game. Yeah,
Mhm.
I certainly agree. I think this is something that I know y'all talk about in the NBA sometimes too, is like the MVP typically goes to the winningest team, even if that player, like the best player on the winningest team, doesn't contribute as much to their overall team success. Um, I do think the NBA or NFL would benefit from a most improved player type award
Mhm.
in the way that like the NBA has, because that would
They
give a
have they
pretty
have comeback player, which is sort of similar, I
but
guess.
comeback player, they want you to only vote for that player if they've been injured, so
Yeah.
like you have to have been hurt. It's it's interesting. I also think award season would be much more interesting and diverse if you were only allowed to be nominated for like one award or something like that. Like,
That's fair because there's speculation that CMC is going to be like the first player nominated for MVP, OPOY, and Comeback Player of the Year, like all in the same year or something.
and it's like let's get some other names in there. Let's recognize
Yeah.
some other players. Um, you could put another guy in for most. I don't know. It just seems like a little. It's annoying when these awards get really homogenized.
hmm
And I think it's always fun to celebrate more teams. But anyway, a couple NFC North quick hitters here. The Packers picked up Trayvon Diggs before their brief playoff run and have since released Trayvon Diggs, formerly of the Cowboys, brother of Stephon Diggs. Definitely has a ball hawk reputation, but injuries have put his career on a different trajectory. And Lions legend, offensive tackle Dan Skipper, has announced his retirement from the NFL. Why are we talking about a swing tackle retiring from the NFL? Well, he was pretty high profile for being the player who reported eligible in the loss in 2023 the Lions had at the hands of the Cowboys, and that sort of became a cult classic that whenever he would report eligible, all the Lions fans would lose their minds. And apparently transitioning straight into coaching. I believe he'll be working with offensive line and tight ends at the East-West game, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes, yes.
yeah, all love to Skip. He was super tall too. He was like very anomalous as an
Hmm.
NFL player. I want to say he was like 6'9". So yeah, fun fan
That's
favorite Lions character.
not the only lion of the day, lion news of the day. The Lions are hiring Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. Is that how you say it? I don't know. As their next offensive coordinator, Jared, as the resident Lions fan more so than I, and knower of all Lions ball and reader of probably heavily on this topic as it pertains to next season. What are your thoughts on Drew as the next guy running the O for the Lions?
Yeah, the predominant fan response was like, "Oh no, oh dear, terrible choice." But the Athletic Football Show has talked positively about the Cardinals' offense in the past. They had a terrible year this year, but the Cardinals' injuries last year were kind of crazy all across the offensive line, the running backs, and then obviously not having Kyler significantly disrupted them. And there's a great Reddit post in the Lions subreddit from a Cardinals fan explaining like, "Hey, this is kind of what a Petzing offense looks like." And he seems like a good philosophical match. Run heavy kind of guy, loves incorporating the tight ends. Folks were kind of giving him some credit for maybe getting ahead of the 13 personnel formation, putting out three tight ends before Sean McVay popularized it this year. So, also was a groomsman at Ben Johnson's wedding, so kind of an interesting tie there. But
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I like that we're going outside the group of sort of like very similar offensive minds here. It seems like we're bringing in someone who he was under Kevin Stefanski for a while, who I think is generally pretty well regarded as an offensive mind in Minnesota and I think Cleveland as well. Um, so I actually I like the hire quite a bit. I think that he's a good stylistic fit for us. He will take over play calling. Dan will not be calling plays to start the season, and yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown basically came out and clowned Lions fans for judging the hire, which I think is honestly fair, just because like what do we know, right? Um,
Yeah. You
but it
don't
seems a
know
good
till you see it.
stylistic mesh. Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually excited. He was a name that I had recognized, which I think was probably not super true for a lot of fans. And I saw a couple fans again in comment threads, Reddit threads, because I was doom scrolling a little bit, make good points that like when LaFleur was hired by the Packers, the Titans had a terrible offensive year when he was their OC, and then he obviously has turned that ship around. And 1 year of bad offense does not a coordinator make with the very limited talent you have as a coach of the Cardinals.
Unless you were the Lions offensive coordinator this last year.
Yeah,
Because 1 year is all you got.
1 year was all I got. And it's funny too because like our offense, even with Morton calling plays, was still relatively effective. So yeah, I think this is a good style match. I like that we're coming from a bit of a different school of thought. Get some fresh voices in there. I think Morton ended up being probably a little too samey, not enough, pushing us in a different direction. So excited for Drew Petzing. I don't want to sit here and just monopolize our time on the Lions'
Sure.
decision making, though. Mike
Lots
McDaniel
of
was a favorite by fans, but he ended up elsewhere, as we'll talk about.
I'm. I'll tell you what. I'm happy that it's not Mike McDaniel. I'm the resident Mike McDaniel hater. Um, but we'll get there. The
Why don't you go ahead and take our
Cowboys.
next hire here? Yeah.
Yes, the Cowboys are hiring Eagles pass game coordinator Christian Parker as their next defensive coordinator. The Cowboys have had famously bad defense in recent years, a lot of which is due to personnel issues, player injuries, etc. But I'm sure it doesn't hurt to get a new kind of mind in there as well. Because, not but 5 years ago, I feel like the Cowboys had a pretty reputable defense back in like, D-Law and when like Leighton Vander Esch was still a player and things like that. And that those days have been a little bit removed from us. Jared, can you explain for the listener? Because I kept confusing myself when I was reading this. Pass game coordinator to me sounds like an offensive role, but this is their defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I believe the pass game coordinator in this context is someone on the defensive staff who um, I assume works closely with defensive backs in preventing the passing game of the offense, right? So this is
Right.
strategizing against the opposing offense, and so I assume that Christian Parker was a defensive assistant who specialized in defending against the pass, now being elevated to defensive coordinator. We do see hires from opposite sides of the ball, but I
Hmm.
feel like typically that would be either like you're a position coach and you flip sides of the ball, or maybe you're a relatively high up there defensive coach and then you flip to like a lower level on the offensive side of the ball. So I would be
Hmm.
stunned to learn that Christian Parker was an offensive coach.
Yeah, I don't imagine he is either. I just, when I first read it, I was like, wait, I'm confused. I had to kind of think about it, and then that's kind of the conclusion I came up with too, is surely it's defending against the pass. That's what it means.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, he
yeah,
was also
uh,
defensive backs coach. So yeah, that's all very lined up.
yeah. I don't know anything about him, but I think that the Eagles have had a pretty reputable secondary, even when some of their guys were down. Like Quinyon Mitchell was down a good amount this year, and I think their secondary was still pretty formidable. So I imagine that he will be good for the Cowboys. No one can be worse. So I feel like he'll be pretty good.
I was Googling to find out more about defensive pass game coordinator, and there's a job posting near us. So if you want to join a high school football team staff,
Oh.
that option's
That would
available.
be just send them the podcast. Like, here's my qualifications right here.
Here's my qualifications. I'm pretty sure this is what this position is.
The whole time we're like, I think
I
so.
don't know. Pass game coordinator, that sounds stupid. Yeah, no, I think this might also be a bit of gamesmanship too, in the sense that if you have an up and coming assistant on a division rival, maybe not a bad idea to try to snatch that person away. Surely knows a
Hmm.
lot about how the Eagles like to coach, and then also takes a talented voice out of their building potentially. Um, I will say the Eagles are definitely a really talented defense. Um, the secondary has been very well coached, to his credit, but I wonder how much their defensive talent
For sure.
improves the appearance of their performance. So,
And
uh,
this was not the only cross-divisional hiring we had.
no, that is what a beautiful transition. The Bucks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, after moving on from Josh Grizzard, have brought in former Falcons offensive coordinator Zach Robinson for the same position with the Buccaneers. I think generally was fairly well regarded by the football talking heads I listened to, and
I had him as one
some
of my
people are
one
always
of my
surprised.
coordinator of the year picks.
Oh wow, it's just 1 year too early. He's about to
Right.
surge with Tampa, but I think this is it's interesting because as we've talked about in the past, the Bucks offensive coordinator spot has been a springboard for head coaches, and I wonder whether Zach Robinson bringing a really inventive scheme from the Rams coaching tree, maybe that puts him on the map for some head coaching work after things did not work out with the Falcons.
Yeah. I like Zach Robinson. I think that there is talent, of course, in Bijan and Drake London, Kyle Pitts here and there, pops as well. But their quarterback room has been kind of a question mark, and Michael Penix's short career. Kirk Cousins obviously very old now, and I think they've still been fine offensively. Not great, but fine enough. And when the quarterback, arguably the most important position in your team is like the biggest question mark, but your offense can still do something, I think that's probably a good sign. Although there are like minor question marks. I don't have not this past year, but I feel like in Bijan's rookie year, for example, it was like way too split between like him and Tyler Algier, and it was like, why did you draft this guy number 8? But I feel like this past year they definitely utilized their top talents to like the maximum extent.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think he's relatively challenging to fully evaluate just because of the quarterback problems there. But to your point, I feel like the Falcons had a pretty competitive end of the season, and that reflects well on him. Um, and I'm really curious to see where his former head coach Raheem Morris has kind of disappeared from conversation for the moment. I do wonder where he
Yeah.
might land as we're going to get shortly to head coaching hires. There's going to be a lot of these coordinator positions coming open here.
Hmm.
Um, there is a pretty interesting reunion happening in Kansas City. So Eric Bieniemy was their offensive coordinator for a number of years, and I believe Matt
Hmm.
Nagy stepped into that role. Well, Matt Nagy's contract expired, and they have allowed him to walk. He is no longer with the team, and so they have returned to Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator. He had a stint with the Commanders as their offensive coordinator, and then was running backs coach for the Bears this last year. He's now returning to Kansas City as their offensive coordinator. So interesting that they want to keep the same style of voice around, but Nagy isn't that voice. I heard on Around the NFL that it might have been Nagy's pursuit of the Titans head coaching position where he sort of said, "Okay, I'm willing to walk away from OC and really try to go all in on this." Um, but currently, Matt Nagy is without a job, and Bieniemy gets promoted back to his old spot.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to like the Chiefs' heyday, some of their Super Bowl wins, Eric Bieniemy was their coordinator, and then he made a relatively lateral move to be the Commanders' offensive coordinator. Do you think Eric Bieniemy would have had a head coaching opportunity by now if he wasn't African American?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think no doubt. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I feel like there might have been some speculation when he made that lateral move to try to get himself sort of out from under Andy Reid's shadow a little bit.
Hmm.
But it is crazy to think that the most, the biggest dynasty of the last decade in pro football has an offensive coordinator that's consistently scheming very well to get them to the Super Bowl. And maybe it's the fact that, I believe Andy Reid calls the offensive plays, but I feel like that guy would get a job in most situations. So it certainly is a suspicious thing.
Yeah, hopefully he can kind of, you know, drum up his value again as a for a future head coaching cycle or whatever he wants to do. Now that he's gone and I don't know if he feels that he's proved himself without Andy Reid or what have you, but obviously he's going back to the Chiefs. I think, I mean, for what it's worth, I think the Chiefs offense has looked worse in his absence. So I think their defense has done not their defense has not been great, but their Spagnuolo has a big reputation over there for doing a lot with little. So I feel like their offense has definitely died down, and maybe they'll come back, much to our chagrin, I'm sure.
Yeah, they've certainly been missing a gear. Another reunion, the Vikings have extended defensive coordinator Brian Flores after he kind of went and tested the market. And if he does not land a head coaching job, I think he is still in the mix for at least the Steelers job. Then he will remain with Minnesota. As a Lions fan, I was rooting for him to leave because he's incredibly talented. But appears, barring the Steelers hiring decision, he will remain uh, with the Vikings. And I feel like he should be a head coach. I think a lot of the situation around his lawsuit against the league with his ouster from Miami and attempted
One of my
hiring.
least favorite things ever.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, actually, I want to put a pause on this because it just sidebar a little bit. I was thinking about the Rooney Rule because Lions defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard interviewed
Hmm.
for the Dolphins job, and I believe there was another minority coordinator who also interviewed on the same day that they hired their coach, and it was a little like, interesting.
They're
Um,
just they were getting the number. They're like, all right, let's get the number. We got
that
look
was
at
the
all these
speculation
minorities.
online. That was certainly the speculation online was like, oh, they're just getting their two guys in so they can hire who they want to hire. Um, and I was thinking about the merits and dismerits of the Rooney Rule, right? Because obviously it leads to a lot of these sham interviews,
Hmm.
where it's seemingly for show. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, well, it does create opportunities for minority coaches to interview for these jobs and get an idea for what might be expected in those interviews. And that does feel like an asset, provided the team is taking the interview seriously and giving them like the same level of scrutiny as they're giving other coaching candidates. Which is not to say that the system is working, but I hadn't considered that as a potential merit, and then that thought had popped into my head. So I don't know if you have thoughts about that, but um,
I
the
mean, my
interviews,
my thoughts are basically the same thoughts that I have for a lot of DEI protocols in workplaces, which is that it's a shame that we have to have a law essentially for you to interview people of color.
yeah, that's also a good point. Yeah. Um, I also wonder whether I don't know. It just feels like honestly, I think if you are a football team and you don't interview enough people that you aren't interviewing at least two minority candidates anyway, you probably
Yeah.
aren't executing your search very well. There are too many talented coaches and talented minority coaches in the league that if you're making a thorough search for your next head coach, you aren't, you know, interviewing black coaches. So, um, yeah, I'm rooting for Brian Flores. I really hope he gets another head coaching job. Obviously, the lawsuit makes that a challenge, but I think he deserves it. I think he's a brilliant defensive mind. Seems to be very well respected,
He's
and it's
awesome.
been, yeah, he's a good
And I
guy.
want him to get a head coaching job so he can get out of the NFC North. Please,
Exactly. Yeah.
please go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Kevin
Anywhere.
O'Connell and Brian Flores. I don't want to deal with this. This
It's
is too talented.
crazy. Yeah. And if nine turns a corner, uh-oh.
Oh. Um, yeah, Brian Flores, Raheem Morris. You mentioned Kelvin Shepard, although this was like his first year as a coordinator. It makes sense that
Oh,
he wouldn't make the
certainly.
head coach jump right away.
Yeah, I agree.
But like those two guys for sure is like, okay. Like we'll get to some of these head coaching hires, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah,
Like,
I certainly I
okay.
don't think Kelvin is ready to head coach necessarily. It was just one of
Yeah.
those things where it's like, okay, well, feel like we're bringing Kelvin in for a reason. Um,
Hmm.
so we did talk about Mike McDaniel
Yeah.
earlier, and he has landed as an offensive coordinator with the Los Angeles Chargers. So he will be under John Harbaugh as the offensive coordinator, unless he potentially ends up a head coach. I think he's still in the mix for a couple positions.
Yeah.
And so, similar to Brian Flores, if he gets a head coaching job, obviously he would leave for that. Currently has not lined that up though. So, what do you think of this ad, David?
What an interesting combination of personalities for
Yeah.
the Chargers, Harbaugh and Mike McDaniel. I don't know if there could be potential butting heads there. We'll see. I think, you know, I've clowned Mike McDaniel a lot because he's such a wacky guy. But clearly there's a talented offensive mind there. I think the Chargers obviously needed a change. I feel like their offense has been so weird in recent years with Herbert and like they had all these receivers and the year started and it was like, oh my God, who is going to stop this offense? And then like halfway through the year, it's like they just forgot how to play offense.
Yeah.
And granted, there were some injuries and stuff as well. So I think a fresh face here definitely helps. At the time, this is before the Bucks had hired Zach Robinson. Eagles still looking for offensive coordinators. Mike McDaniel was in the mix for both of those, and he basically shut them down. Like, actually, guys, I'm going to take this position. So that's worth mentioning too, I think. I, you know, I'm excited for the Chargers to look different. I think they are a team that I would say like something had to change because there was just something wasn't clicking. Um, and I feel like I don't know if this is that change, but I don't mind the shot at it.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously the Chargers had significant injuries to their offensive line over the course of the
Hmm.
last year that affected what they were able to do offensively. But Mike McDaniel's Dolphins teams had a reputation for falling apart in the winter months.
Hmm.
And this Chargers team has a notorious reputation for falling apart in January. And I don't know if it's something with Mike McDaniel's scheme that opens teams up that he coaches to falling apart in the winter or something like that. But one thing that appealed to me about him potentially going to Detroit is I feel like Detroit does have a makeup where, relatively speaking, we're pretty ready to play through the whole season and have that mentality. And so, can you balance his concepts with the team's gritty identity? Jim Harbaugh wants a gritty identity. I just feel like their team is sort of melted like putty in the playoffs, and I wonder if McDaniel's scheme is going to be conducive to succeeding at that part of the calendar. So, just kind of interesting. Certainly, I don't want to say I could see like a better spot opening up for him, but I do wonder whether an Eagles team with Saquon and with an elite offensive line that's been relatively healthy might have made more sense on paper. I also wouldn't want to hang out with Nick Sirianni for that long of a time, though, so I can understand that too.
Yeah, those would be some crazy personality clashes
Oh my
right
God.
there.
Yeah, Mike's probably in that interview like, oh God, please, I do not want to deal with,
You
like, no
can't be
offense, Nick
more
Sirianni, but
insufferable than myself. That's
yeah,
crazy.
man, you really hate Mike McDaniel. That's wild. I don't know. I think he's entertaining, but that's just me, I guess. Uh,
I don't hate him. I don't know. It's just the way he carries himself. I don't know. It's just weird.
yeah, he's there's like a vague arrogance almost to him. I don't know,
He like carries himself like a mafia henchman. It's it's just
like a
strange.
mafia henchman. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah, you don't want
But
to be. You want to dodge the henchman label. I guess being a coordinator is like being a henchman. So
yeah, in a way.
in a way. Okay, all these decisions obviously impactful for their teams. Obviously, as a Lions fan, I really care about ROC and all these other teams. Their
Yeah.
success or failure can be decided on this, but multiple teams have landed on their next direction at the top. So let's cover the four head coaching hires we've seen since we recorded last Friday, starting with
Wait,
the Ravens
let me ask
replacing.
you this.
No, please, yeah.
Um, I know it's obviously it's more complicated than a black or white yes or no answer. Out of the four hirings, how many do you like?
These head coaching hirings,
Yeah,
candidly, I'm not going to pretend that I understand a
for
lot
sure.
about
That's what I'm
these
saying. I know
guys.
it's more complex than this.
I would say, like, how many do I, with a bullet, go, yeah, I think that's going to work out really well?
Yeah.
Honestly, two of these guys I don't know well enough to feel confident. And I feel like two other of these guys ended up in places that don't make a lot of sense to me. I feel closer to saying zero than two, for sure.
Yeah, my answer was one. So I was one I was like, okay. And then there was one that I was like, oh. And then there was two that I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I have probably a different one than you have that I'm like I sort of get the vision,
Yeah.
and another one that I think could work but didn't really make sense to me more for the coach than the team.
Hmm.
Uh, let's just go ahead and jump in. I want to get your take.
Yeah,
So
please.
the Ravens, the Ravens have brought back a defensive assistant with the team previously, Chargers defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, to replace John Harbaugh as head coach of the team. How do you feel about this, Damon?
I'm of two minds. One, First time head coach, I believe. That's always exciting. I think I have been higher on the Chargers defense than probably consensus for a while. I've spoken well of guys like Derwin James, and other players on that side of the ball. I really liked when their team was like, and I don't think Jesse Minter was even the coordinator at this time, but when it was Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, and they kind of had this um, defensive identity, and then the offense kind of took over the vision because Justin Herbert gets a lot of run, etc. So that all that being said, I really have liked the Chargers defense recently. Um, so I think Jesse Minter is probably qualified. My issue with this hiring, and it's not really an issue. It's just you had such a stable presence in John Harbaugh, and I don't know if like from my understanding, Jesse Minter is not a Ben Johnson level coordinator where I feel like the whole league was like, this guy is awesome. And it was like so clear that he was ready to take that next step. And maybe he is that, and I'm not saying he's not. The difference between, if I'm comparing him to Ben Johnson, he went to the Bears, which was a team that had basically been going through a revolving door of head coaches for a time. So it was fine to take a chance on a guy like him. This is a team that just fired a mainstay of the franchise for 18 years for a new head coach. And I know they have Super Bowl aspirations. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but a first time head coach was an interesting choice for me. Um, Moving on from Harbaugh to somebody who's never done it before, when I know you want to make the Super Bowl. Does that make sense? How I explain that?
Yeah, certainly a risky place to bring in inexperience at that coordinator spot. And Harbaugh, himself was a first time coach, but the situation at that point might have been different. I think I was born, so I wasn't super plugged in on the
You,
Ravens in the early aughts. So, but I will say with the Chargers, Jesse Minter, I feel like in all the games I watched with the Chargers, they would bring up at some point, oh yeah, total head coaching guy, like, we see him doing that. And so maybe because of the wheel teams I was encountering, I watched the Chargers a few more times, and it always seemed like people were talking about Minter in that way. Very exaltatory of his skill. And I am just I think it was Mike Garafolo came on. He'd the call. He's an NFL Network guy, insider type. But they were having some discussion about Lamar potentially being not the easiest to work with. I wonder if this was potentially aiming towards some Lamar synergy. I don't know. I don't love when teams just continue to rely on voices from the same family of voices when you haven't gotten success from that group. Okay, you got rid of John Harbaugh, but you got someone who worked under him at one point to come and replace it. It just feels a little, I don't know,
Mhm.
50-50. I'm not super jazzed by it, but I've heard a lot of praise behind Minter when watching Chargers games this year. And so I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he's a good coach, a good coordinator, and could be a good head coach. It's just an interesting move for a team when they are wanting to win now to hire a coach who has never been a head coach. That's all.
No, no doubt. Absolutely a reasonable concern. I think, especially with, I guess a lot of the second time head coaches they could have hired were offensive guys, and the Ravens do just feel defensive, right? I don't know how many one-time defensive coaches were coming available. Maybe if the timing were different, they would have looked to an AFC rival for that, but we'll get to it
Oh,
later.
Raheem Morris, he's still out there. Brian
Raheem's out
Flores.
there, but he has it. I mean, he's already had two coaching stints without long-term success. So
Yeah.
I don't know how many more rolls of the dice he'll get, but I wonder if a certain New York head coach maybe would have gotten some
Mm.
consideration if the timing had changed. This next one, total crapshoot to me. Dolphins are hiring Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. It's their next head coach. Heard
I
some
know
buzz
even
around.
less about this.
Yeah, seriously. Um, I know he's the former head coach of Boston College, and I was reading an
hmm
article that was saying he didn't exactly blow it out of the water there. So interesting. I feel like the Dolphins need a lot of repairs done on offense. I think the Dolphins are a little like lost at sea right now either way. I'm not super energized by this hire in either direction.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, and I pulled this up because it happened while we were potting, and I thought this is the time I should mention it. Dolphins also hiring former Bills special team coordinator Chris Tabor as their special teams coordinator. Since we're on the Dolphins, I thought I would throw that in there. Don't really know anything
Um,
about him, but it happened. And I don't know anything about Jeff Hafley, and yeah, I don't feel particularly strong. I think the Packers have had a good defense. How much of that is talent compared to coordinating, compared to whatever, compared to the fact that their stadium is freezing for half the year and it's probably a little easier to play defense. I don't know these things, but I don't feel particularly strong one way or another about it.
they've also crucially hired Kyle Smith as their assistant general manager. So Kyle Smith heads rejoice.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I saw. Well, I guess we'll get to the Titans in a minute. I think the Titans retained their special teams coordinator, but um, I guess they're next up on the list. And I'm curious to see if this is the hire you thought was a disaster. The Titans have brought in 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh as their next head coach. Was um, before Aaron Glenn, the head coach of the New York Jets, and so has been out of that role for about a year and a half. The Titans deciding to be the team that takes another swing at Saleh at the head coaching position, and apparently he plans to call plays for the defense as the head coach of the team.
oh, interesting. Very interesting. How do you feel about the Robert Saleh hiring? I feel like I keep giving my takes first.
Well, it seems like it was down to Matt Nagy or Robert Saleh, and I think hiring Matt Nagy would have been a mistake. I just
I
nothing about
don't.
Matt Nagy has given me like, yeah, this guy's got head coach aura, you know. And I guess Ben Johnson didn't necessarily have that either, but um, Matt Nagy already had an attempt with Chicago,
Yeah.
had one nice season. The rails came off. And Mike Borgonzi, the general manager coming from Kansas City, it felt like, oh, the Lions, for example, hired Bob Quinn from New England, and then he brought over Matt Patricia to replace Jim Caldwell, and that worked like a charm. So um, I grow wary of, and actually Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan and the Dolphins are kind of doing a similar thing here, where we're getting Coach GM from the same organization pairing up. But
Hmm.
I like that they opted for Saleh, and I actually think that Cam Ward has such a natural leadership quality to him that having a head coach that leans a little more defensive might be okay, just because you have a player who um, can probably take command of that offensive room. They've been interviewing a number of guys, including former Titans OC Arthur Smith. Could be really interesting to bring him back. I am cautiously optimistic that this could work, and I think at the very least he will be better than Brian Callahan. So
That's not a high bar to clear.
not a high bar to clear. I would say of the four moves, I don't think I can say in good faith that this is the one I'm most optimistic will work, but it's the one that I would say combines making a little bit of sense with having some optimism. But you might have an opposite take, so.
Yeah, I totally forgot that the Dolphins also hired the Packers guy as their GM, John Eric Sullivan or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, totally forgot about that. So good call by you to make that connection. How do I put this? Robert Saleh gives me the ick.
Really interesting.
there's something about him, and it was when he was the Jets head coach. I feel like I would watch his pressers, and I would just be like, I don't like the way that you present yourself. Granted, it's very hard to succeed in that organization, as has been the case for a long time. Um, Succeeding as a 49ers defensive coordinator, not as hard. And to his credit, this is a team that was decimated by injuries all year, yet they won time and time again. How much of that was because of defensive coordination? I'm not sure. Um, but you can't say that their defense was garbage all year, despite their injuries. That much is true. So, the mind and talent and stuff, and he's been a head coach before. All that's there. It's just also, yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse. If you wanted a defensive minded coach, how about Brian Flores? Did he get in your interview process? Um, or someone like that. I don't know. I also think back to when the team had Mike Vrabel as their head coach. Um, Titans are a tough unit, a tough unit to root for with some of the decisions they make in the front office.
Um, yeah, I definitely think it's fair to be skeptical of Salah, and you're right. I think he didn't quite have the command at times with the Jets that you would want, but also, I mean,
He's like too
Aaron
much of a
Rodgers
meathead. I
a
don't
little
know.
bit could be
We
that.
do get we do get Robert Saleh, Liam Cohen twice a year now. That's
Yep, that
cool.
that, that feud. Um yeah, I guess he's just I think he has some presence at the very least, and I think that
Yeah.
that offers the Titans something that they had with Mike Vrabel, but I think with Salah, they'll at the very least have some manner of identity. I think the Titans are really at risk year after year of kind of falling into anonymity. They're sort of the Chargers of or Cardinals of the AFC in that way, where they kind of just become the forgotten 16th team. And I think
Hmm.
Salah will prevent that.
Interesting.
Lastly, the only head coach hire besides Harbaugh this last week here, who is a repeat coach, former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski has landed with the Falcons as their head coach and is bringing his Browns offensive coordinator Tommy Rees over as OC. What do you think of this hire, Damon?
This is the one I liked, Jared, because I think Kevin Stefanski is underrated. Although I didn't exactly think the Falcons should have let go of Raheem Morris in the first place, and
Do
I
you
voiced
like
that.
Raheem Morris?
I
Nothing
like.
in this podcast indicates you like
Mm,
Raheem Morris.
yes, I may have said that before. Um, but this is not a bad move. If the Falcons would have fired Raheem Morris and hired Robert Saleh, I would have lost my fucking mind. Like, oh my God, what is happening? Um, so I like Kevin Stefanski. I think he is a little underrated. I mean, the Browns as an organization are kind of a dumpster fire. Um, there was something interesting that I saw between him and Baker. Um, because I guess he traded, he was the coach when Baker was traded from the Browns. And Baker posted something like, still waiting on that like text from my coach to tell me I got traded. But now I get to play him twice a year or something like that. That was kind of silly. So if that's true, that's not great in terms of the look for him. But I think that obviously the Browns have been a struggling franchise for as long as time has existed. And he is one of the better head coaches in their time. He got them in the playoffs a couple times. So I think going to, what or going from what was maybe at a time one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL in the AFC North to one of the least competitive divisions in the NFC South. Um, I wouldn't be shocked if the Falcons turn around and have like an 11 win season.
Could see that for sure.
I mean, they tied for the division lead at 8 and 9. So,
See, this hire was interesting to me because I like obviously Sala is not nearly as proven as a head coach to me as Stefanski is, but at the same time, I feel like this was a bit of a weird pick for Stefanski because I think if Stefanski had a quarterback that he really liked in Cleveland, I think Cleveland could have gone a lot further than they did.
mhm.
Um, and I think he was held back by that. And I feel like there were multiple openings. Obviously, the Giants with Jackson Dart came off the board, but um, I don't know. I mean, you have Cam Ward, a number one overall pick that a lot of people have confidence in Tennessee, and you don't have to really worry about that quarterback position for the next few years if you feel like you can coach him up. Um, and maybe a couple other. I mean, I guess there aren't a ton of proven spots, but like even the Raiders, right? They have a fast track to Fernando Mendoza, so you've got that like number one overall talent. Instead, you go to a team that's kind of like between worlds and doesn't have a first round pick this year. Still figuring out if Penix can do it. He has experience with Kirk Cousins, I believe, from his time with Minnesota, so maybe that was part of the thought, unless they didn't overlap, but I'm pretty sure they did. Um, I have to wonder how much of the appeal for this position is the fact that the GM spot is also open and whether he's going to be able to have significant influence over who becomes general manager and whether he can kind of put himself above the GM on the flow chart, that kind of thing. Because I do think he was pretty desirable this cycle, but I don't know. I felt like it was a strange pick for him to make because going to say Baltimore would have removed the single biggest problem he had as coach of the Browns, which is not having someone who can run an offense. We'll see. I definitely think it is the highest probability hire of these four to succeed. It just really depends on how that quarterback position works out, whether that success is, Bucks level of success where you're making the wild card or making the divisional um, win, so you're making the wild card weekend every year, or whether you're actually pushing for championships. I think that's still the question.
Yeah, I mean, you make it sound like as if you had a pick of the litter. Do you think that's kind of what it was? Like he was the most wanted coach after the Harbaugh hiring happened?
I mean, perhaps, perhaps not. It seemed like he was getting interviews with multiple franchises, and I just feel like there weren't enough people out there who blamed him for what Cleveland was doing for him to not be viewed as a pretty cutting edge offensive mind and two-time coach of the year, right? Like he's got quite a pedigree in that respect. So I
Yeah,
imagine that he would probably, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if I were a franchise, I would be more interested in Kevin Stefanski than Robert Saleh or,
for sure, for sure.
maybe Jeff Hafley. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm overestimating the interest, but I feel like he might have had more leverage, and maybe worked his way into a role where he could manipulate the GM situation.
And maybe some of it is familiarity with the situation that he had in Cleveland. Young, talented defense, offense without a surefire quarterback situation. He's seen it before, and made something out of it, and I'm not saying that is just a theory.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan as a really elite running back, kind of replicating what you got out of Nick Chubb for many years.
Hmm.
Um, and Penix is by no means a lost cause. Maybe he likes what he sees in Penix or thinks that he can use Kirk Cousins for one more year as that bridge guy. Um, yeah, I can see the logic. I guess if I were Stefanski, I'd be like, oh, Lamar Jackson. Well, shoot, I'm gonna gun for that job, or
Right.
I'm not gonna cancel my interview with the Titans and see if I can just be the guy who turns Cam Ward into a superstar. Um,
Another
but
side note on that, and this kind of goes with your general manager thing, going to a job like the Ravens, with a person like Lamar Jackson, don't you feel like there's perhaps less control there as the head coach because they have, superstar MVP level quarterback that maybe has more of a voice than if you go somewhere like the Falcons where it's like, no one can tell me what to do because no one here is quite that level of influence on the organization.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah, certainly Lamar. I mean, we just saw. I don't think it would be fair to characterize what just happened as power struggle in Baltimore, but Um, Lamar is with the Ravens and John Harbaugh is not. And
Hmm.
I imagine that we could certainly have seen something similar if Kevin came in with a particular offense he wanted to run and Lamar not being interested. So it's fair enough. Yeah, there's definitely a place where it is a coaching opportunity where you can shape the direction of the franchise to a degree. So
Yeah.
certainly interested to see what he's able to do there. Um, I just think there's still a few pieces away from having the kind of roster that will consistently compete.
Yeah. Enough front office news, Jared. Let's get into the football that occurred this last weekend in the divisional games, before we talk about these upcoming conference championship games. And let's start with a fascinating game. I will say, by the way, after going 6-0, 8-0, how many games were there? However many games there were in the wild card, um, I went 2-2 in the divisional.
Tough. That's tough.
Undefeated streak is done. It started off 0-2. I was real worried. And then
Yeah, that would have
and
been a bit of a course
I
correct.
I was 100% right in the NFC and 100% wrong in the AFC. Why don't you kick us off here with probably the best game of the weekend?
Yeah, I think I would probably argue, well, granted I didn't get to see all of this game because I was kind of working.
They were both overtime, so it's
Yeah, I
fine.
mean a very exciting game and a very impactful game in the trajectory of the league. Broncos 33, Bills 30 in overtime. Um This game ended up being really back and forth between the Broncos and the Bills. You had called it last week. We could see a multiple turnover game from Josh Allen, and that could give the Broncos the edge. And that's pretty much what happened here. That was a big reason why the Broncos were able to propel themselves past the Bills. There was a huge referee controversy in overtime.
Oh
It looked
boy,
like
was it bad.
a catch from Brandon Cooks, but then was wrenched from his hands and ruled an interception, which gave the Broncos the opportunity to march down and kick a field goal to win. Um, but on that second to last play of overtime, Bo Nix broke a bone in his ankle, and it is going to cost him the remainder of the playoffs, meaning the Broncos will have to turn to backup quarterback Jarrett Stidham in the AFC Championship game. It gives me shades of Brock Osweiler a decade or so ago, stepping in for Peyton Manning as they were trying to climb
Yeah.
that playoff ladder. Um,
Um, I saw a picture that circulated a lot of Jarrett Stidham, I believe at the time was the starting quarterback of Auburn, and Bo
mhm.
Nix was in high school as a recruit, and they took a photo together.
That's so
Um,
funny.
I also saw a post from Nick Foles that said, "Don't worry, guys, the Patriots really struggle with backup quarterbacks." Um,
That is
also,
really
also
hilarious.
good.
I mean, he the call was gas and stood him up. I don't know if he's enough at
I got
quarterback.
no clue.
But we'll talk about. I don't think the Patriots played very much winning football in their own game. I think
Yeah,
they just played
yeah.
against a team that had a lot of losing football going on.
Hmm.
And so, really interested to see whether he's able to perform at a level that keeps the Broncos out of their own way. And this was a devastating loss for the Bills. Josh Allen was in tears at the podium, blaming himself for the loss. Um, just really frustrating for a team that finally had the likes of Patrick Mahomes out of the way and played a really competitive game
And
all
they
the
were down
way.
early, and they
Yeah,
clawed their way back.
no, they were absolutely dueling in this game. Definitely pretty respectable. And again, if that call goes the other way, um, the Bills could be en route to face their division rivals. I mean, we could have two sets of division rivalries
Yeah,
in
let
the
me
AFC and NFC. But
let me paint a picture if you didn't watch the game. The way overtime works, first team gets a chance to score. If they score, the second team also gets a chance to score. The Broncos got the ball first. The Broncos did not score. The Bills got the ball. The Bills chunk play. It's like a 35, 40-yard pass down to Brandon Cooks that would have put them in field goal range to then win the game because the Broncos had already had a chance to score. It is essentially a 50-50 ball that Brandon Cooks has in his possession when he hits the ground. Therefore, should be a catch down by contact. And now the Bills have first down. But they roll, and the Broncos defender, I don't remember who it is, has the ball in his hand. And they say, "Yep, it's an interception." And they look at it, it's an interception. And not only does that happen, which I thought was an insane decision to make, I thought that was immediately ruined the game for me. Um, Three defensive pass interferences called on the Bills for the Broncos game-winning drive. One of which I think was questionable. One of which was definitely a DPI, and I don't remember the third one. But one of them was Tre'Davious White, who I had sung his praises in their wild card victory for kind of coming back and having a big game. Um, just terrible. You hate to see a result go that way. Obviously, the Broncos were the higher seed. They've been a better team all regular season, but I think it was kind of just snatched unfairly out of the Bills' hands, which is not the first time that it's happened for this team in the kind of Josh Allen era. There have been several times, like against the Chiefs, where they had that back and forth game, and then Chiefs win last second, and there's something questionable that happens, and I just hate when that happens.
yeah, yeah,
Because
for
it
sure.
seems
I
like they're
I actually
always on
didn't.
the other side of it.
No, no doubt. I didn't see the play live, so I don't necessarily want to make a comment on it. But it's been a huge source of controversy and frustration across the board, and I think that it's unfortunate because we went into the weekend, the divisional weekend, with the chance that we could guarantee that a team that has never won a Super Bowl would advance to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
But both this game and the subsequent AFC game made that a pipe dream. And the biggest news, somehow in a year full of massive firings, another shocking firing down the pipeline here. There had been some rumblings, but in such a close game, it was unexpected that this would truly cost Sean McDermott his job. Nonetheless, the Bills have moved on from their head coach. They made the playoffs 8 times in 9 seasons, 8-8 in those playoff games, and 98-50 in the regular season. Five-time division winner in those 9 seasons. Obviously, sharing a division with the highly competitive Patriots for at the very least the kind of tail end of the Belichick era. They tapered off, but had a couple of years where the Patriots were still top of the crop. But um, yeah, this one was shocking. Owner Terry Pagula said the decision was based on their loss against the Broncos, citing the quote proverbial playoff wall as a reason for this decision to take place. What do you think about this move here, Dim?
I've voiced some opinions of, coach firings I agreed with, some I disagreed with. This may be the one I disagree with the most.
Mm.
Um, and not only is the firing, it's the timing of the firing right after this loss against a team that was a much higher seed than them, with the controversial call that I just talked about in overtime. Um, and this is not the Tom Brady Patriots or the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs where they've had the Super Bowl success. But this era of the Bills under Sean McDermott has been the only successful Bills teams I've ever watched.
Mm.
Um, Growing up, this was not a good football team. I know, like right before I was born, they had lost several Super Bowls consecutively. Um, but in my childhood, this was never a serious team to really even think about, and then they have been basically since I graduated high school. And you can put a lot of that on Josh Allen. Sure, he's an MVP winning quarterback, very talented player. But some of this was with Tyrod Taylor. Yeah, so some of this was with other guys. So I think it's a weird decision. It's weird to do it and then immediately cite the game that you just lost on what was mostly a controversial call. Um, yeah, I totally disagree with this. And also, because it's kind of already into the coaching cycle, you've already missed out on the Harbaughs and some other people that you may want to have this job. Because again, just like the Ravens job, this is a team that obviously has big playoff aspirations right now. And I don't really see a lot of coaches out there in the cycle that's like, oh yeah, that's the guy that's going to take us to the next step. Um, I don't know if you saw this, they interviewed Philip Rivers for this job
I
today,
did see that. Really
which is
interesting.
crazy.
Uh, if I'm like the Arizona Cardinals, do I call Philip and just see if I can get him in the room? Because like, I think the fact that he's a
I'd
first-time
call
head
Sean
coach.
McDermott.
Oh well, like honestly, of all of the head coaches available this cycle, and I dare say I'm willing to throw John Harbaugh into this. Sean McDermott might be the one that I'd be most eager to bring in.
No, absolutely, yeah.
He's a little younger, had a lot of recent success, and yes, I'm sure Josh Allen has helped propel that. Um, but nonetheless, he's brought a great attitude and an identity to a team that, as you said, has been really bad. And I think there's a world where I understand this move, right? If they moved on from McDermott and said, here are the four concrete reasons why, watching the way the defense has performed, we felt that he wasn't guiding that side of the ball and the offense has disappointed us in this and that way. But every explanation of the move has felt hollow.
Hmm.
Um, the names they've brought in to interview for the job have been uninspiring to say the least. Um, I think if they really had an idea of wanting to do something fundamentally different and needed a different voice, so be it. But it seems like they're just bringing in watered down versions of what Sean McDermott has been, right? Respectfully, I don't think Brian Dable, Bill's offensive coordinator Joe Brady, I just don't look at those guys and see them as what this team needs. And the messaging
Yeah.
also was just poor messaging around all of this. Brandon Beane, their general manager, has been promoted to president of football operations in the midst of this as well. And I'm very worried for the Bills. I think we could see a situation where the Bills drastically regress because they're not just moving on from a long-term voice that hasn't brought them Super Bowl success. They're doing so without a clear sense of direction on where to go to replace him or what they feel like they're missing. It just seems like a mess.
Yeah, you said something that reminded me of this too. Not only do I think Sean McDermott has been a good coach, he's been a good culture setter. Like
Mhm.
that's something that I don't think you really see from definitely not other coaches that have been hired in this cycle or are still on the market in this cycle. He brings an identity that I think they didn't have and that they've kind of thrived on. And I hope that, wherever he ends up, he can do that there too. I also wanted to mention because you brought up Brandon Bean. Part of this press conference of like the firing after him and then the Brandon Bean promotion. I don't know if you saw this. There's a lot of talk about Keon Coleman.
I did, yeah.
And the owner, what's his name, Terry, um, said like the coaches really wanted Keon. And Brandon Bean was just being like a good team player, is what he said. And it's like, okay, so you're throwing Keon Coleman under the bus right now. Like you're just like this was a bad pick, and we shouldn't have picked him. But it was Sean and the coaches that wanted him. It wasn't the GM. That's why I'm promoting him. Like, what are we doing over
And
here?
then and then, Heed the Call poll said that on social media that were circulating multiple like Hard Knocks clips and like Bills media clips of Brandon Bean being like, yeah, really can't wait to get Keon Coleman and being at the combine. Like apparently at the combine he was like glad that he ran a slow 40 because that slow 40 made it more likely that Keon Coleman would be available for the Bills to
Mm.
select. Like it just seemed like they were laser locked as an organization on Keon. So I really don't even know how accurate that was. It just seems like a mess.
It's so
I'm
unfair too.
really
Like he's like been in the league for 2 years. Yeah, he's had a like a character thing that is, work ethic thing or whatever that's been a little problematic. But like you've seen the flashes of talent. It's not like you can write this guy off.
the receiver issues I think have been a narrative for Buffalo for so long. That's probably why he's under the microscope in that way. But it just seems a little it seems a little classless to just start throwing players under the bus in that way, especially by name, right? If you
Hmm.
said, "Oh, the receiver group hasn't delivered," I'd be like, "Okay, whatever." But um, yeah, just a little wacky. I'm gonna go ahead and put it out there now. I haven't seen McDermott interview anywhere, but
Mm-mm.
the mental image of Sean McDermott coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers for the next 25 years just feels like it just
Mm.
feels so right to me. Like he looked like a Buffalo
No, but
guy,
I
but he
like
also
Sean
looks like a
McDermott.
Pittsburgh guy.
I don't like the Steelers.
Well, maybe he'll make me like the Steelers more just by being himself.
I liked
Maybe
Mike
Sean.
Tomlin though. Like I didn't have an issue with Mike
That's
Tomlin.
fair. That's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I could see him. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the Cardinals are probably everything I've heard is like the Cardinals are not super in demand in any way, but God, if
Hmm.
I've got an opening right now, I'm probably pushing my chips in and if I'm the Titans and Robert Saleh hasn't put ink to paper, I would say, well,
Oh
maybe
no,
there's another
he's signed a
defensive
5 year
mind.
contract. Don't worry, it's done.
Oh boy. All right, let's move on to this next game that I think we can get through about as quickly as Seattle took the lead. I went to the bathroom right before kickoff of Seahawks Niners and came back to find the Seattle had already scored an opening kickoff. Rashid Shaheed return
Yeah,
touchdown, and
yeah.
they did not look back. Seahawks
That trade's
41.
looking good.
This looking real good. Didn't look good enough for my fantasy team to keep me competitive, but that's okay. He was able to help lead the Seahawks to 41 points to the Niners 6. The Niners just looked completely overwhelmed from the jump, obviously giving up that opening kickoff touchdown. They were not able to respond in kind, and I think momentum just continued to steamroll them as the game progressed.
Robert Saleh's last look as a defensive coordinator was letting the Seahawks and Sam Darnold absolutely destroy them.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't know if I was a coach and I immediately had 7 dropped on me. It would take a lot of willpower from a super injured Niners team to bring themselves back in the conversation, and it appeared to just be time for that to have happened. So
Yeah, the magic finally wore off. Doesn't come without, you know, s something negative for the Seahawks as running back Zach Charbonnet tore his ACL in this game. He's obviously going to be out for the rest of the playoffs and probably for a good chunk of the early part of next season. Um, I know they really like running him as kind of the this guy. I can tell him to go through this gap and he will do it and he will be relatively effective. And Kenneth Walker is like, yeah, that guy might take a spin or a juke or a hesitation and go somewhere else because he thinks he sees a better opening. And sometimes it's like, oh, that was a 40-yard run, and sometimes it's like, oh, now you lost 3 yards. Way to go. Um, so they don't have that, I guess, tried and true aspect of their running game, but I don't think it will be a huge difference maker. I would imagine.
Yeah, probably a nice weapon to have. I think I saw or heard that Darnold only threw 12 passes over the course of this game or something. So definitely a run heavy scheme, but I think that this is a good I don't know. I think this injury is not ideal, but honestly, the Seahawks have looked confidently like the best team uh, in the playoff field, just based on
Hmm.
their performance and how overwhelmingly dominant it was. And I think it sets them up well for that. Oh, sorry, he 12 for 17. Darnold was 12 for 17. So, yeah, I think overall, they're set up really well. Niners GM John Lynch also mentioned after the season that Brandon Ayuk has played his last snap as a Niner because he did not suit up for the team all season, despite having ostensibly recovered from his injury, and just being away from the team. And I don't know what is going on there, but it seemed like giving him that extension has proven to be a mistake for the team.
Yeah, unfortunate. We'll, see what the Niners do this offseason. They have a lot of guys that need to come back. They probably have a couple holes they need to fill. They have a coordinator spot they need to hire. Um, but you know, I haven't. I feel like it's been ages since I saw a fully healthy Niners season. Um, so hopefully everyone can come back. I know George Kittle injured himself, or not injured himself, but towards ACL last week. So they have a lot. They have a lot on the table, and they're, if I'm not mistaken, relatively expensive with all of these players, and a lot of whom don't play. So we'll see how they kind of pivot going forward. As the Seahawks don't seem to be going anywhere, and the Rams we'll get to also in their division are looking very good.
Yeah, apparently left tackle for the Niners. His name is eluding me right now.
Trent Williams,
Trent
is it
Williams.
Trent Williams? Yeah,
Yeah, I think said after the game that they were, playing with house money or something like that this season just because of how injured they were, and I think that's absolutely true.
yeah,
There have been some Niners losses that have felt like disappointments. I think this one was the bill coming due on an impressive
yeah,
season for all the injuries that was just really going to be difficult to sustain. So, props to Shanahan for a great coaching season. Um, Hopefully the Niners can have a season where they avoid these kind of bundles of injuries, and come back with a fully healthy team. Interested to see who they install as defensive coordinator with Saleh being hired
for
now.
sure, for sure, for sure. Let's talk about the AFC or another AFC game. We already talked about one AFC game. Back to the AFC. Patriots 28 versus the Texans 14. Bill come due. How about Bill coming due for the Texans defense? What I mean by that is we've praised them all season, largely in the fact that they've been able to win and carry games. But when you start multiple possessions inside your own, 50-yard line, less than half the field to go, you get worn down. And the offense certainly was not a help here. Lots of CJ Stroud. Takes and comments after this. I've seen several videos like, who would you take over CJ Stroud? And, like they start off with other NFL quarterbacks, and it's like, oh, it gets to a point where it's like, oh, I don't know. And then they're like Fernando Mendoza, and they're like, absolutely. And it's like, oh, okay, that guy's still in college. And then they're like, the local high school quarterback, yes. And I was like, okay, I see where we're going with this. But a turnover plagued game, a lot of errant throws, a couple fumbles. Patriots defense got possession after possession after possession. Really, two touchdowns does not tell the story. It just felt like the Texans offense was a negative factor in such an extent that they put their defense in a hole that was unclimbable. At least that's how it felt for me watching this game.
Yeah, when you said the bill was coming due, I thought you were referencing Texans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair being fined $11,593 for violating the NFL uniform and equipment rules by wearing eye/nose tape that had "Stop the Genocide" written on it during the wild card game against the Steelers for the Texans. I I assume this would be in reference to Israel
It
and
sure is
Palestine.
in reference to Israel. However, it does not specifically say that. And this is the same league that has end racism on the back of everyone's helmets. So I didn't think stop the genocide would be a problematic statement to have on your eye nose tape. I don't care that it's in reference to Israel. I'm glad it's in reference to Israel. Shout out Aziz Al Shair. If I had $11,000 to give you, even though you're a multimillionaire, I would do it.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this is just because you're not allowed to have that message, like you're not allowed to have any message on your eye nose tape, as opposed to like what the message was in particular. Um,
Hmm.
because I know like, if it had said like absolute beast, would he have been fined also, right? Um, I do think though, there's been yeah, the NFL's not exactly come out on one side of the Israel-Palestine conflict also. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some motive as well to try to shut down, you know, the NFL is very comfortable addressing social issues in the ways that are not harmful to their product. And the moment it creates any sort of controversy that could prevent people from watching the game, they shut it down real quick. So I think in a similar vein, this is always going to be a little suspect here. Yeah, the Texans just absolutely melted down. CJ melted down. I, for one, do think it is worth questioning whether CJ can be a franchise guy just based on how this season overall has not been propelled by CJ offensively in meaningful ways, and then absolutely detonated against a Patriots team that wasn't playing particularly good football, I thought.
No.
This was certainly a battle of two teams trying not to lose, and one of them losing less than it was of like a really dominant Patriots team absolutely smoking the Texans. I think their defense, the Texans' defense, is too good to waste on these performances, and I wonder if the Texans will be scouring the backup market to bring in some viable competition if they don't see Davis Mills um, as that competition
I feel like when
pursuing.
CJ was out slash bench this year, Davis Mills looked better.
Yeah, I
And that,
mean,
and granted, in a very small sample, CJ Stroud has had also a lot of good football. It's just, the bad football really outshines, especially in a huge playoff game in which it's not a lack of talent, it's the decision making. It's you're getting sacked and you're throwing to an area of the field you can't even particularly see well because you're mid falling down. You just take the sack or throw the ball on the ground. Like you can't just throw it up there and hope that your guy comes down with it, especially when your biggest guy and most threatening guy is not in the game because Nico Collins was out, right? It's like I don't know who you're hoping comes down with this miracle football, and it happened multiple times. Um, so yeah, the Patriots, like you said, though, were not exactly like, oh my God, they're so good. It was just like, yeah, they started with the ball with 40 yards to go, like 8 times. So, and yeah, it makes sense that eight is obviously hyperbole, but um, eventually you're gonna score when you're that close.
yeah. Sidebar on the Texans as well. While we're here, GM Nick Casario mentioned that running back Joe Mixon's status for next season is uncertain after he had a foot injury. This past season, he described it as a freak foot injury. I think that there is. I think Woody Marks is talented, and I do wonder if the Texans will also be in the market for. I don't think Nick Chubb has given them quite enough. Mixon's been hurt pretty consistently. They seem like a team that, if a high level running back comes loose, or maybe in the draft, I wonder if the Texans look to, especially if they run it back with CJ and want to make him less of the focus of the offense. Do they try to get a complement to Woody Marks so that they can have a really consistent ground game? They just feel like a candidate for that, no doubt.
Maybe they should
Um,
trade Nico Collins for James Conner.
it was funny because James Conner came to mind. But yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a good D Hop reference.
For the casual, I'm referencing DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, which was a horrible trade as soon as it happened, and everyone knew it.
God, so bad. Let's hit the other great game of this weekend, Damon. What was our NFC overtime showdown?
Yeah, kind of a shocking overtime one, but the Rams end up emerging victorious 20 points in Chicago to the Bears 17. Um, the big thing from this game, Caleb Williams doing Caleb Williams things, last play of regulation, escapes pressure in the pocket, turns his body and just delivers this absolute rocket to a somehow wide open Cole Kmet in the end zone 50 yards down the field, which propelled the game to overtime, and then the Rams emerged victorious. But the Rams, this felt like a game they had control of for a lot of it, despite there not being a huge gap in the score. And the Bears kind of just did some miracle stuff at the end, ultimately losing. You see the potential, of course, for Caleb Williams in the big plays. There were times where the offense looked kind of stuck, where things exactly weren't connecting. Like they couldn't move the ball super effectively. I am, this is kind of back-to-back weeks now where the Rams, I think, despite probably being more talented on paper and having every reason to win a game they were in control of early, almost lost it at the end. Against the Panthers the week before, now the Bears this week, and going against the Seahawks this upcoming week, is not a team that I probably think they can pull that off against. So that was kind of the biggest takeaway for me. The Rams not looking as good as I think I thought they would this playoffs. Two very close games, that by all accounts they could have sealed the deal earlier in the game. The weather was also really bad. A lot of drops, a lot of uncharacteristic drops. Puka had a couple drops and kind of simple out routes and things like that because of the weather, and that impacted the Bears too. They just couldn't get a ton going, not in a consistent basis at least. They just kind of had big chunk plays randomly. But it was a fun game, and I was hoping that they could pull another kind of miracle comeback in overtime, as they've done that a lot this season, coming back late in games. Um, I could also think with a guy like Ben Johnson as your coach, and if how much of a decision was it to kick the extra point to tie it rather than go for two and win it right then and there? Don't even worry about overtime. That would have been fun to see too. But it was fun to watch. How did you feel about this game?
Yeah, I was rooting against the Bears for the Ben Johnson factor to a degree, but I think it was a great game. Give Caleb credit where it's due. He had a couple turnovers that were head scratching, but then also some amazing plays. I mean, it was a jaw dropping, absolutely jaw dropping. They're on like the 12-yard line for that fourth down attempt, and he's pushed back 20 yards and then heaves back shoulder falling, and it's just one of the most beautiful passes you'll ever see straight into Cole Kmet's hands, and that felt like we got him where we want him moment, but the Rams just able to come back, capitalizing off of late Caleb pick. I've heard some speculation. Was this DJ Moore running the wrong route? Either way, I think that this was probably for me the game that just had the least kind of complicated outcome, in the sense that if the Rams and the Bears, either the Rams or the Bears lost, I think we'd probably still leave feeling pretty good about both teams. I do think Seattle has a pretty distinct upper hand in the upcoming matchup, but um, I think the Rams Seahawks divisional is exciting. It'll be three straight rounds of the playoffs with a divisional matchup, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
And yeah, this one was electric. It was fun to watch. It was intense. Um, and really curious to see whether the Bears can keep this momentum next season, um, based on based on their play. We've seen Jaden Daniels and CJ Stroud have electric first years. Caleb having an electric second year. Can they maintain this growth? Um, and continue to be competitive. I'm curious to see, especially now that the Bears are going to have a first place schedule, right? Not a last place schedule. So big change for the Bears in terms of what their opponents will be offering them.
Yeah, definitely not an exit from the playoff like the Bills, where it's disappointing considering it was their first time here. I think they can go out of the season with their head held high and come into next season with something to look forward to.
Yeah, no doubt. But we already have something to look forward to. In just the next couple of days, we have the conference championship games for the AFC and the NFC. Patriots at Broncos is up first with Jarrett Stidham standing in for Bo Nix in the biggest game of his life. Damon, what do you think? Picks, predictions. Who do you see coming out on top here?
Yeah, I would say for me, the Patriots, I think, have probably had the easiest playoff schedule. The Chargers and their 3 points were not super convincing in the wild card matchup. They held the Patriots to just 16. And then even scoring 28 against the Texans, I already mentioned, the offensive woes for the Texans, I think, was the Patriots' best asset in that game. They didn't necessarily wow me on either side of the ball. I think it just kind of fell in their hands. Um, does that mean they, aren't going to perform against the Broncos? Not necessarily. I think they still could. Um, but I think the Broncos have been the more talented team. They do have a backup quarterback. That's obviously a little scary. Most of their identity this year has come on the defensive side of the ball. I think they could give Drake May some problems. I don't, the problem with the Patriots being the AFC Championship right now is they haven't really been tested yet, and I feel like this is maybe going to be the first big test. The Broncos defense, excuse me. I know I said the same thing about the Texans. Um, but I think the Jarrett Stidham Broncos offense will probably perform better than the Texans offense just did this past week. Um, and the Broncos defense could give, the Patriots a run for the money. Although Chargers, Texans, Broncos, that's three really good defenses in a row. So I'm not sure how I would go for this game. Obviously, I would pick the Broncos, but the QB situation is leaving me a little shy to do so. Like I could really see this one going either way, I think.
Yeah. Do you have an ultimate choice? Put your prediction skills on the line here.
Um, you know what? I don't want the MVP clash in the Super Bowl, the Drake May Matt Stafford. I want the exact opposite. The Jarrett Stidham Sam Darnold clash. So give me the Broncos.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to take the Broncos in this one as well. Maybe I'm just believing too much of the Jarrett Stidham hype, but I think that honestly, an offensive performance from this Broncos team that's able to minimize impactful turnovers might very well be the difference maker. Just because I think Drake May is imperfect, and I think their offense is imperfect. If I'm not mistaken, the Patriots had a pick six or fumble six last week that gave them 7 of their points. So it's not like they've hung 30 on the Chargers and 30 on the Texans. And all you need from the Broncos, I think, is just a well managed game. And if you can get to, I think if the Broncos can get to 22 points, I think that's probably enough, right? And I imagine that if Stidham is able to stay composed, anything's possible here. I just personally haven't seen that game from the Patriots that says, oh, they can turn it on, right? And I think the
Hmm.
Broncos do have a little bit more of that in them. So I'm leaning more towards the Broncos here. And I had this thought earlier that what if the Texans after the season make a move to acquire Jarrett Stidham from the Broncos? And then it's like when Osweiler went to be the
Yeah.
Texans coach, and then like they had to salary dump Osweiler by trading him and a pick to Cleveland, like crazy stuff. But that thought just came to mind that we've been talking about how it's a relatively interesting market for backup quarterbacks, and if Stidham plays out of his mind, all it takes is one team, right? We saw Nick Foles get starter money in Jacksonville, um, and pretty decent money with Chicago as well, um, in the sort of late 20 teens, early 2020s. And I'm just curious to see whether Stidham, depending on his playoff performance here, or whether he can maybe build a bit of credit for himself and maybe open those doors either through a trade or once his contract expires with the Broncos as sort of a later career option here. I don't actually know how old he is off the top of my head, but I assume he's probably um he's actually only 29, so I could see a team,
Mm,
viewing him as potentially young enough to get, 3 or 4 years out of. It's interesting.
for sure. Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, for me, the NFC Championship feels like the Super Bowl. Uh,
Interesting. Okay.
and this is kind of what I talked about this yesterday with Dom because we were talking about um, the NBA championship, and no disrespect to the Pistons, but I said the Western Conference Finals I think is going to be the best series in the playoffs, and I kind of feel like this game could be that because I think out of the four teams left, the Rams and Seahawks feel like the best teams. Although I mentioned the Rams kind of I think have underperformed in their wins thus far. Um, I guess I just have more confidence in them than I would in either AFC opponent. But this is also a divisional matchup. The game they played 3 or 4 or 5, however many weeks ago, was insane and went down to a 2-point conversion. Like this has been a great matchup, and I think we could have another great matchup on the books here. The Seahawks have only played the one game, and they absolutely destroyed the 49ers. So they're coming in with a lot of momentum, obviously. And I think if the Rams do any of this kind of like, giving up stuff at the end of games when they shouldn't, when they obviously should be in the driver's seat winning, the Seahawks do not look like the team that you can let that happen against because they will take the utmost advantage of it and emerge victorious. And that is the way I'm going to go. I think the Seahawks will beat the Rams again here and advance to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think if this wasn't a divisional matchup, I'd actually have a lot more faith in the Seahawks outright for sure. I think the Rams are closer to the Patriots and Broncos to me than to the Seahawks, just because late in the regular season, even leading into the playoffs, the Rams were starting to drop games and losing some momentum. And I just think that I think this will be a great matchup. I think it will be a very engaging matchup. Um, and I think the Rams have the chance to push the Seahawks. Um, I think it will come down for the Seahawks in part to can they get into a favorable game script early, the way they were able to against the Niners, if they can put themselves in that sort of like run first, ball control situation. I think that favors them 100%. I certainly wouldn't count out Stafford and the Rams for some late game magic. It's just crazy to think that we're going to see three out of the four possible Super Bowl combinations are rematches of Super Bowls in the last 10 to 12 years, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, which is crazy to think about. I guess the outlier there would be Rams Broncos, which I something about that just did not appeal to me.
It
I just
feels
like
weird.
it feels weird. Like oddly, I want new teams to come in, but at the same time, to their credit, right? The Rams would be the only one who would be kind of built around the same core as their last Super Bowl. Patriots,
Right.
Broncos, and Seahawks, all new coaches, new quarterbacks. Yes, the GM has hung around for Seattle, but otherwise, these are very new casts of characters, even if they're wearing kind of those same jerseys. So as an outside
For
fan, it
sure.
feels a little less redundant. I would say that I want the Super Bowl to be Seahawks, Broncos for sure. I think the Seahawks are the best team in the playoffs right now, and I think they have the inside track, especially without Bo Nix in Denver. And I think that they will win this game. I just think that they have so much momentum. They could come out flat out of the bye. Instead, they hang 41. They've got what you want to see from a potential playoff contender. So I could see them going to the bowl here. That's my pick.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Rams, what was it? I'm sorry, Seahawks Broncos was like 43-8 or something diabolical when they matched up in the Super Bowl
Yeah.
last time.
Well, they had two in a row, right?
Oh,
Or
right.
no, or no, no, because Broncos
No.
went twice in a row, but it was Seahawks one year
Hmm.
and then Panthers the next, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
And the
and
Seahawks had the
the
Patriots one.
Seahawks had the
Yeah.
Patriots won. And they absolutely like decimated the Panthers, but they got decimated by. I think that's one of the first football moments we actually talked about for ethical ball and rebranding. Like, oh, do we want to put football moments like on the logo for our
Yeah.
podcast? And I think one of them might have been Peyton Manning missing the snap from Manny Ramirez as the first offensive play of that Super Bowl turns into a safety,
Mm.
or like a defensive touchdown or something of that ilk. And it was just like a holy smokes moment. This is going to be that kind of game. So,
Have
um,
uh have you seen the honorary captains for these championship games?
I have not.
I'll give you three of them because I don't think the Rams have named one. And you could tell me your favorite. The Broncos honorary captain will be John Elway.
Okay.
Legendary quarterback, former GM for a time. The Patriots, Adam Vinatieri, legendary kicker, um, for both them and the Colts. And the Seahawks will have one of my favorite players from my kind of high school era. Probably my favorite player, actually, definitely my favorite player of this era of the team. Who do you think it is? You want to guess?
It feels like it would be Marshawn, but if it's not
No, not
Marshawn
that
Lynch,
big. It's a defensive player from the
a
from the
defensive player.
Legion of Boom.
I feel like Earl Thomas has had some like concerns of late. I don't think they'd bring him back. Was it Bobby Wagner's like still with the Commanders? Who would it
He
be?
is still with the Commanders. Yeah,
I mean, like I guess it could be Richard Sherman, but
not a Richard Sherman guy. It's
yeah.
it's Cam Chancellor.
Oh, nice, nice, nice,
I
nice.
love me a good hard hitting safety. It's um, kind of a build of player that I have always been like admired slash been like intimidated by. I'm like
For
that
sure.
guy's terrifying. So that is their honorary cap for the game. I don't think the Rams have announced theirs, or at least I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Think some yeah, I don't know who the Rams, Kurt Warner, I don't know. Either way, I don't know. I think Vinatieri's kind of fun. We weren't around for John Elway's playing career, so we can't really celebrate that quite as much, but uh I think that's really fun. I just remember Richard Sherman because he was on like Madden NFL 16, and like I just
That was
remember
crazy.
playing that one into the ground, so it's just like the thought of just like him doing this on the cover.
Hmm.
And I do think he's a little boisterous, but like relatively endearing compared to some of the other like super loudmouthy types. So anyway, I don't know. I like players who are brash, but not brash to the point of being like CJ Gardner Johnson levels of brash. And I think Richard Sherman falls a little under that line for me, but
He had a good play for the Bears in that game against the Rams.
yeah, and then he got I think banged up at some point, but I was like, "Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, he is like the thread of um CJ Gardner Johnson spent his time this season on what, three different playoff teams? Uh,
crazy.
like the Texans, Eagles, and Ravens. I guess didn't make it, but he was with the Texans from
They
the
all have
Eagles.
one thing in common. CJ Gardner Johnson.
CJ Gardner Johnson.
He's like a mercenary. Like he just goes in there and fixes the culture up for like a week and then he's out. That's like
Yeah, well,
best
he
thing.
probably fixes the culture for about 30 minutes, and then they're like, "Oh wait, this guy's kind of not." I don't know if CJ is the
Yeah,
best
yeah.
hang. I don't know. I don't know. Either way, I won't comment. I still have my ski mask, so what can I say? Uh, we are in for an awesome week of football, and I think a lot of folks will be indoors this weekend with the
Yep.
storm happening. Hopefully, folks are able to keep power and enjoy the games in some potentially pretty tough conditions. I guess the games are in Seattle and
Denver.
New England. I think Seattle's not in the
Denver's
way
the
of
one seed.
anything, and or oh, Denver. Denver is
Yeah.
the one seed. You're right. I think both of those places are relatively out of the way of this weather, so it shouldn't affect them too badly. But
But
uh,
both cold places in their own right.
yes, well, for sure. Either way, super excited to see how this week shakes out and preview the Super Bowl. We'll get to circle back around, do some Pro Bowl talk. Yes,
Pro Bowl talk,
yes.
all pro teams. If they do the NFL awards ceremony, we'll have our own awards. Oh, I'm looking for that's next week's pod, I think, right? That'll be awesome.
I think that's got to be it. Yeah, we can do
Yeah.
our paper plate awards for the 32. I
Mm,
think that'd be a lot of fun. Last minute predictions, maybe if we get all the nominees for the awards before the ceremony happens, because I believe they
mm,
do it now a couple days before the Super Bowl. So
mm,
that may pad out the Super Bowl show if it's not a very interesting bowl. But if it's Stidham versus Darnold, get your popcorn ready. It's going to be a great few weeks of football. Thank you for listening, and watch now to make my kick. And this is the
mm,
kick the Bills should have had, and I'm
mm.
attempting it to save Sean McDermott's tenure in Buffalo.
That sounds good to me. I'm ready. Let me get the old gold post settled up here
Hmm.
in Mile High Stadium, where this kick should have been attempted by legend Matt Prater. Was he still their kicker? Was he their
It
kicker
was
the whole
Matt Prater,
season?
baby. Let's go, Matt. Because my
That's
dad, my
crazy.
dad texted me and was like, "Wow, Matt Prater just sent him to overtime. This is crazy." Uh, okay. Oh, it's low altitude. Like,
Mm,
subscribe.
mm.
I need oxygen. Tell your friends about us. Okay. This is for you, Sean. Big S. Here we go. Kick is up.
Oh, and the legendary Jared Prater, Matt Schmidt, but that sounds like a real person. Makes the kick, and oh, the Bills are in the AFC Championship. They're going to New England. Wow, that's awesome. Sean McDermott is still the head coach. That's crazy. I love that so much. That kick was good.